Alright, so here's what happened. I made this totally wicked awesome video where I was explaining the bass and how the theory kind of worked. And like Flea came over and Gene Simmons, and we were just kind of hanging out, kind of talking. You know, we had guest star Sydney Sweeney on the show. We're just kind of hanging out, you know, whatever. And but the video totally cut out. Shit, can't prove it. Tough. But I think I know what the problem is. The problem is I was not wearing the right attire. So. Whoa, check that out. I got a wicked hat. I totally just kicked the bass. Alright, so here's what's happening. I'm going to teach you 3 basic things. The first thing is, what are the notes? How do they work? How do you find octaves, harmonies, things like that? I'm going to talk about a scale and how to use that for basically everything. And then I'm going to talk about not only how to play by yourself, but how do you play with other musicians and how does the bass actually support other musicians. Alright, I got my band t-shirt, I got my hat, I got my bass. We're ready to rock and roll. So obviously this bass is 4 strings, most basses do, right? And standard tuning for a bass is the same as a guitar, except for it's just missing the last 2 strings. So E, A, D, and G. E, A, D, and G, okay? So the musical alphabet is not that complicated, there's just a few letters. It starts at the letter A, and it goes to G sharp. And the only weird thing is that between the letter B and C, there's no like B sharp or C flat. And then between the letter E and F, there's no like E sharp. So, and I'll just show that here. So you start lowest string, start on an E. So E, then an F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and then to A. G sharp to A, right? And then, if we start on the A string, just A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then to E. Now, what you might have noticed is we got the E here, but isn't it also E on the lowest? So how does that work? It's kind of like a piano, how you've got little sections or little octaves of like C to C, C to C, right? It just keeps going up. Same thing here. Every 12 frets, the metal wire's the fret, every 12 frets, it's going to be an octave, right? So if we have an E here, then we'll go down to the 12th fret, which is on the side of this bass, you might be able to see. It's usually labeled with a double dot. That's your 12th fret, E, E. Here I was the exact same note, just an octave apart. Same thing with A. So the cool thing about octaves is that we get to the octave every 12 frets, but every 5 frets, it moves on over to the next string, right? So if this one here, remember when I started with E, and then we went up, this third one's G, G sharp, then A. So if this 5th fret is A, and this open is A, isn't that the same note? Right? Very similar. I'm a little odd too, that's alright. So, the cool thing about that, right, is that if I want to do an octave, instead of going a full 12, if I'm like riffing out, I'm like, if I wanted to like, you know, bump up and, but if that's too hard, see that? The 7th fret of the next string. Same thing if we want to get to A on the 7th fret of the D string. And if we want to get to D, we go to the 7th on the G. I'm not going to lie, this kind of sounds like Mario. Alright, I'm going to show you something cool. So, if you can hit the octave on the same string, right? E, E, and you can hit it on the next string up. Can you hit it on the 3rd one? Well, the answer is behind door number 3. He said yes. Okay, so here's how it works, ready? So, the fundamentals behind it is, if we look at the frets, and I said every 5th fret makes it the next string up, right? And you know that on the 7th fret it octaves, well then you go 5 frets is the next string, and then you add 2 to get 7, right? So you go 5 frets to get to the next string, and then you add 2. 1, 2, here. Same thing for the A. Or in short, wherever your root note is, if you go 2 strings up, 2 frets over, got an octave. All right, now let's talk about harmonies. So octave is the same note. A harmony, let's be honest, I don't really know what a harmony is. It just sounds stinking cool. That's what I know, right? And I know that a harmony is every 7 frets, right? So if you got an E here, then the harmony will be on fret 7. And if it's like, you know, you get like the Minions singing like the Illumination thing, it's like, bah, bah, bah. You know what I'm saying? Harmonies and melodies, right? So if this is a melody note, octave is a octave melody, harmonies on the 7. Now, what do we know about 7 that we just learned? That the 7th fret can be the 2nd fret on the next string up, right? So then you go on the 2nd string here, go on the 2nd fret. So the really neat thing about like octaves and harmonies and stuff like that is if I could choose any fret on the fretboard. So I'll choose the D here, the 5th fret on the A string. And what I'll do is, just like with our E here on the end, if we go 2 strings down and 2 frets over, we get the octave. We can go here, go 2 frets or 2 strings down this way and 2 frets over that way. And we got an octave, right? Any of them. Choose the E here. On any string. The cool thing about that is there's a lot of songs, there's a Shakira song that even uses it, that uses these octaves, and they just go back and forth. Right? It makes it a lot more entertaining, and it's really basic. So then, if you're thinking, can you do the same thing with harmony? Absolutely. Choose any note. We'll choose the D again. Go for the harmony, which, if you look at the E here, the harmony is on this fret here. You can do that here. Now you've got a chord. Any fret on the fretboard. Right? It's all available. Okay, freeze from the future here. I drew it out because I think it might be easier to look at. So if this is your fretboard, right, if these are each of your strings, and then these are the 3rd fret, and then the 5th fret, right? If what I'm saying here is that, let me pull out my marker. If I play this note here, right? If I play that note here, I can go 1 string this way and 2 frets down and play this one, and that'll be the harmony. And then if I go 2 strings over and 2 frets down, that'll be the octave. So octave, harmony, then this is your root note. And you can do that on any fret. So if I start at the 3rd here, I go 2 frets, 1 string, 2 frets, 2 strings, 2 frets, and you can just go like that, if that makes it any easier to see. Congratulations, you have finished phase 1 of bass everything. You now know everything there is to know about bass music theory. So we're going to move on to step 2, which is how do I actually apply this to playing, all right? And for that, I'm going to teach you a simple scale. Now, for a scale, you've got a root note, which is your bass note, okay? And you have to find that. So it depends on the song, and it always changes, but the scale stays the same, but the placement differs, right? And then it'll make more sense in a second. So I'll start here, and we're going to start on this 5th fret, the A, right? And what it is, your root note or your home bass, right? Then you skip a note and you go to the 7th. Then you don't skip a note and you just go 1 fret up and hit the 8th. skip a note and go to the 10th. Then you skip another note and go to the 12th. Then you don't skip a note and you go to the 13th. Then you skip another note and you go, where's that, 13th, 14th, to the 15th. Then you skip another note and you go all the way to the 15th, 16th, 17th. Ugh. So in total it goes. Slower. All right, Freeze from the Future again. I drew it out again. This is like open note, use the first fret, second fret, third fret, right? So I'm saying here, if you start on the 5th fret, then you just skip one, the 7th, and the 8th, skip the 9th, hit the 10th, skip the 11th, hit the 12th, and the 12th fret's actually your harmony note from the 5th, because the 7 frets apart. And then you hit the 13th, skip the 14th, 15th, skip the 16th, and then hit the 17th, which will be your octaves. So there it is. If you want to pause that and just play it or whatever you want to do. So one of the first things that you have to notice about this, right, is if you start on the 5th fret, and if 12 frets is an octave, this scale travels 12 frets, because you finish on, if this is now, you're now open string on the, what would be the 5th fret, an octave and an A, right? And so what the cool thing about that is this scale goes from A to A, which is really, really neat, which means that all the notes in between can be replicated if we find another A note, right? So if this is an A, you know, and this is an A here, then we can do the same scale. So what I would do if I were you is get comfortable with that scale, because we're about to use that scale for a lot of things, and it's really important that you know it so well that it just kind of just happens, you know? So the cool thing about the scale is you can basically use it in any song, right? And it's a good way to get used to playing. And what you do is just start with a rhythm, right? Choose a rhythm. So I'm gonna go ba-boom, boom, ba-boom, boom, ba-boom, boom. That's my rhythm, right? So I'll just choose that home bass, the root note, and I'll do that rhythm. And there's two ways of cutting. You see how I'm going ba-boom, boom, and then I like two of them are held, and then the next ones are cut. So how you do that is either you lift up your finger very gently, and it mutes it, or you just put your finger here and just touch the string lightly. And the cool thing is, right, is let's say you want a little bit more oomph, just hit it harder. Or less. Right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that groove that we came up with, and I'm going to move it up the scale and then down the scale. See how simple that was? Just choosing a groove, kind of fitting in with the timing, and bringing it up and down, right? But obviously not every single bass line sounds like that, because we don't just move things up and down. We choose notes in between and we go around, right? So instead of just starting with like, right? I'm gonna start on the home bass, and then I'm just gonna choose another random note. So I'm gonna choose here, and then heck, I'll pick this one, right? And then I'll go up to the 12. That'll be my song. So I'll pick my groove. So that's a good start, but that can get kind of boring after a while, right? So let's take it back to remember when we learned about octaves and harmonies and melodies, right? Well, let's just apply that same thing, right? So if we look at our scale, we'll just take the first 3 notes of the scale. This one, then this one, those first 3, right? I know with that, I've got this one, I've also got this, and this. Because it's the harmony and the octave of my first note. And that means that if I have this note, I've got those notes too, and this one. So if I were to make a jam off of those few notes, it might sound something like this. Now we're starting to get the ball rolling a little bit here, right? But not everything is just playing, you know what I mean? Like, how do we make that a little bit more interesting? And here's what you can do. You can play those notes, but if I know I've got this, and then I know I've got, those are all the notes I know I have just right there. So if I want to do something cool, I could go. Kind of easy, right? But what happens when the root note moves, right? Because not everything we're going to be playing starts with the A as the root note. What if it's the G instead? Well, the scale just shifts. If this shifts down 2 notes, it all shifts down 2 notes. So you play the same scale. Though you did it right, if you end on this note, and it's the octave of this note. Okay, so here's the question. How do I even find where I'm playing? Like, how do I find those first root notes? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little track on the pedal. So it'll be a little guitar track, and then I'm going to try to figure out where I'm playing. And what I do is I take the first 3 notes of that scale, right? And I try to play that. So I just start somewhere, and I just go like, didn't sound good, no, there I am, and then you find it, and then once you find it, then you can jam out, so. Congratulations, you have now figured out the scale, you know everything about bass scales, and you're basically a perfect bass player, except for this one little thing. How do you even play in a band? Now this is, without a doubt, the most important thing. You can know 3 notes on the bass, and if you can play in a band well, they'll hire you. If you know a trillion notes, but you just are sloppy with the band, they're not gonna care. So this is what you need to know. The first instrument and the first musician that you're gonna be jamming with is the drummer. The drummer is the bass player's best friend by far, okay? The reason is because they have to find this thing called pocket. Now, pocket's kind of crazy. It's not really like something you really define. It's kind of, pocket is what happens when there's a groove so jammy that everyone goes. That's the dictionary definition of pocket, okay? It's when it just happens, you know? And in order for that, the bass and the drums have to play like perfectly together. And the basic theory of that is when the drummer hits the kick drum, you play your note, and when they hit the snare, you stop, right? So if they're doing very simply, if they're going, you can very simply go boom, 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 and that's going to be your simple bet, right? The problem is, oftentimes it's never that simple, right? But to get a good start, we're going to see if we can do this. I'm going to play the bass with my left hand and my right hand. I'm dyslexic, and so let's see how it goes. It kind of works, I don't know. But that's the basic idea. The other part of it is your drummer's almost never playing a drum beat that simple. You know, usually they got something, and they've got more drum pieces than the kick drum and the baby here. But if they're playing a more, like, I often listen to, they'll hit the thing called the hi-hat, the right? And if they're hitting that like in eighth notes, usually maybe I'll play an eighth note. So if they're going like, you know, boom, 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 doo 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 dum, boom, 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 boom. You know, but if they're going like, see how, like, when I'm singing, kind of matches what the drums are playing. I can't play those two at the same time, but you get the general idea. These guys are best friends, okay? The next dude that we are going to look at is going to be the guitar player, okay? Now, the guitar player, yes, he's going to do like 18-minute guitar solos, but he's absolutely essential for the band, right? And you, as the bass player, have to make the foundation for the guitar player to do his 18-minute guitar solos, because a good background will make a good guitar player, but a bad background will make an okay guitar player. See what I'm saying? So, basically what I'm going to do, I pre-recorded some tracks on the guitar, and I'm going to show how the bass, just a couple different things of like, pay attention to. I'll be doing like quarter notes, like boom, 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 boom. I'll be on that boom, 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 boom. You know, things like that, right? Maybe just sustaining one note, just kind of notes. I'll be doing a bunch of different things and just take note of what sounds good, what doesn't to you, and then I'll go up that scale and kind of show how that works too. So in that last clip, you can see I started with just playing like exactly what the guitar is doing, do, 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 do. And then I kind of stopped and like slowed it down a little bit, do, do. And then I added the melody, or the octaves, and then some of the harmonies. And then I started following that scale. So you can see how different ones produce different sounds. And in that case, I think what sounded the best was doing, just following what the guitar was doing, right? But it may be different to what you think. It definitely depends on the song, because I'm about to do another tune, and that you can kind of see what the difference in the sound is. See how simple that was? All I was doing was following what I know, and all of the things that I've done just from learning, from practicing. If it sounds right, it's right. If it doesn't sound right, it's probably not, you know? But I'm about to do one more track, because I think it's very important to know that if a guitar plays a melody note, sometimes the bass can play a harmony, and it'll make a cool sounding chord, and it'll sound a little bit different. So I'm gonna do a run with the guitar, and I'm gonna start by following exactly what the guitar is doing twice. And then I'm gonna do 2 times where I do the little harmony bit. And just see what you think of it, you know? See if you like it, see if you don't. Did you like that? Did you not? Who knows? But if you do, it's kind of cool, because like what I did is I just basically mixed some of the harmony notes, some of the melody notes, you know. And what you do that by just messing around, seeing what sounds good, because I really thought the one that went, I thought that sounded the coolest, but maybe you just thought standard. Either way, there you go. You know everything you need to know about the bass, and you're basically like the best, you know. But just keep practicing. The best thing you can do on YouTube, just pull up, they're called backing tracks. So pull up backing track for bass, and then it'll be like videos of like guitars and everything going crazy with drums, but no bass. And then you can kind of look at there and figure out, all right, now I gotta play, now I gotta figure out what I'm doing, right? How do I figure out where my root note is? You know, just keep playing until you find it. Things like that, really simple. And then do that, play your favorite tunes. The best thing about bass is you can put on your favorite track and just, all right, what's the person playing bass doing? They're going, and you find it, you know, whatever it is, you can figure it out. So there we go. You are a master at the bass.